Hey everyone, thank you for the introduction. So yeah, I'm gonna jump right in, and so this is the general problem that we're trying to solve is the problem of trust in social media, and kind of this general crisis in trust that we kind of starting to feel and observe in various different ways. And the way we're approaching the problem is thinking about the information ecosystem in terms of a marketplace. So it's mainly an advertising marketplace, right? So in this marketplace, user attention is the underlying asset, right? That's what is being sold and traded. And so all of the incentives that exist kind of are incentives to maximize user attention. So maximize engagement, maximize clicks, and so on and so forth. So this ends up incentivizing a lot of kind of stuff that's really, really popular, which is fine. However, it doesn't create a lot of incentives to, for example, share expertise or kind of build relationships that are built on trust. And at its very worst, right, these incentives start rewarding things like extremist content and trolling and all of these kind of behaviors that are a little bit, considered unhealthy, unproductive, and sometimes damaging. So what we're trying to do is create a marketplace which can actually incentivize expertise. And generally, prediction markets are really good for that, right? So prediction markets are really good at rewarding expertise. So what we've done is develop this protocol where content is the underlying asset. And in order to build a prediction market around this asset, we need a way to measure and quantify and measure its value, right? We really want some sort of metric that then people could kind of bet on. And so what we've done is create a reputation system. We're using a PageRank-based reputation system to do that. And it's a Sybil-resistant way to actually measure the value of content. And this allows us to build this prediction market, and then we have a much better foundation for building healthier communities and actual incentives to share expertise, ways to reward expertise, and so on. So this exists already. We're in beta mode. We have an app, a mobile app, desktop app, and the relevant tokens exist on the Ethereum mainnet. So you can actually, by using the app, you can earn these tokens today. So that's exciting, and we have the reputation system working. It's actually doing what it promised to do. So it's actually encouraging people to share and post quality content, share quality commentary. So that's really exciting to see this actually working. So now I'm going to go in a little bit, go back into and try to cover some of the mechanisms that we use and kind of how we go about designing this prediction market, and especially thinking about this role of this fundamental metrics in designing marketplaces. So when we think of content as an asset, we already have some good tools to turn it into an asset. And there are some applications, some writing that has already done that, or there's one app Steemit that kind of pioneered the way the mechanism to do this. So the basic life cycle of the this prediction market and content in this prediction market is user posts a link. We have a bonding curve market maker that can issue shares for that link. And the way that works, it's basically an algorithm that can mint shares and set the price for those shares. So the first person gets a really low price, the second person gets a really higher price, so then you can incentivize reward early participants. And what we're doing, users don't have to spend or give away their tokens to buy these shares, they just have to lock them up. So it's a staking mechanism. So that's kind of a different, that's what's different from most kind of traditional prediction markets. This is a staking only, kind of like a prediction market light scenario. And then there's a time period, we use 3 days, where after 3 days the staking stops, and we look at the ranking of the post, and if the post is on average ranked higher than all the other posts, you get some rewards. So the rewards are coming out of the global inflation rate. So we're minting new tokens to give out as rewards. So the mechanism is basically all the users that are paying some amount of money through this inflation dynamic, through getting diluted, right? But then they have a chance to win this pot that results from inflation. And then so the rewards go to the post, and then all the users that staked on that post get a portion of those rewards based on how many shares they hold. And then all of the tokens that they stake get unlocked. So that's the general idea. And again, this kind of, in general, this already, people have done this already. The hard part is actually this determining how we resolve this market, right? How do we decide what is relevant content? How do we measure this fundamental value of content? So the most important foundation, the most important property that this metric should have is that it should have this very base layer of resistance to manipulation. So it should be resistant to Sybil attacks, which means you should not be able to create a bunch of fake accounts and then upvote something, and that would increase the rankings. Like, you should definitely not be able to do that, because that's the easiest way to manipulate the system and break everything. So the early suggestions kind of use this coin voting mechanism and actually use the actual, measuring the actual money that people stake on this post as a metric, as the ranking. So that's kind of Sybil resistant, but it has other problems, and we really want to avoid that, because that creates this self-fulfilling prophecy. This market at this point, it stops being a prediction market, because when you stake on the post, you're no longer making a prediction. You're basically fulfilling your own prediction, right? So if you stake enough, then the ranking will be high enough for you to win rewards, and that's not something that we want. And we can observe this dynamic in Steemit. So this is like this very early app that was the first to kind of create this type of marketplace. So on Steemit, you stake on a post, and then the ranking of the post is the sum of all the people's stake on that post. So what happens if I'm a whale? I'll just stake all my tokens on the post. I have a ton of tokens, and then that post becomes the highest ranking one. I win all the rewards. That's great for me, but it kind of defeats the purpose of this whole ranking system, right? all we end up with is the ability to speculate on content, which is cool, but it's not really giving us anything else. So the information that the information that market gives us is not valuable. And this is a similar problem with assassination markets in prediction markets, right? So the assassination market is when I say, oh, I'm placing a bet of $3 million that person A is not going to get assassinated. And what that does is create a bounty for someone to bet against me and actually go out and assassinate that person. So again, so that's no longer a prediction, it's a bounty. It kind of breaks the system. So we want, right, so we want our predictions to actually be predictions, and we want those to be very distinct from the outcome of the prediction market. And a caveat to that, right, there may be cases where you want to design, where all you want to do is enable users to speculate on stuff, right? Maybe you could build a marketplace where maybe you want people to be able to speculate on memes, right? You're not interested in surfacing the best meme. You already know what the best meme is. You're not interested in any kind of incentivizing people to make more memes. They're already making a shit ton of memes, right? So all you really want to do is like I want to be able to bet on a meme. If it goes viral, I get money. Yeah, then you don't need this fundamental metric. Then all you're doing is creating a speculative market, and you're not really interested in any information that you can like gain from that. If outside of that kind of scenario, you should be thinking about these things as more like prediction markets, where there is this fundamental layer that you're betting or staking on. So this is why we have a reputation system, and we designed this Sybil resistant reputation system based on personalized PageRank. So PageRank was initially designed by Google to rank pages and rank search results. So just to compare it against coin voting type mechanisms, coin voting will have the trade-offs of coin voting will always be plutocracy, right? You'll always have whales that will have overwhelming power. And you also have this problem of a lack of context. It's really hard to define precisely who the token holders are. That could change at any moment, right? So all of your token holders might sell all their tokens to a corporation at one point. Now all of the corporation has all the tokens, and now it's making decisions that are irrelevant to what you were originally wanted to do, and so on. So it's hard to enforce. It's hard to say, be like, oh, okay, I only want people that are experts in medicine voting on these proposals to develop drugs or something like that. So personalized PageRank it doesn't have these trade-offs. The other trade-off is that it's a little bit more involved to set it up, so it requires some assumptions, some trust assumptions. And it's a little bit harder to compute, so harder to do on something like a smart contract. So to give you an intuition of what the trust assumption is and in general how this whole thing works, so this is kind of a visualization of a specific relevant community. So each community in our protocol on Relevant has its own reputation system and manages their own reputation system. And at the root of it is this set of trusted admins. So that's in PageRank terms, that's the personalization vector. And it's also the trust assumption. So you assume that these guys over here are trustworthy. And you can do, right, communities can decide how specifically they want to enforce this. Maybe there's some way to verify their real identity and so on. But once you have this, you can have the rest of the network. You can have a much larger group of users that are fully pseudonymous. And this network is Sybil resistant, and you don't have to worry about real identities. It just works, which is really cool. So just to give you some intuition about how that happens is, so if you imagine that all of the reputation basically flows from these guys.
Who are those guys and how are they determined?
So I'll get into that later in the next slide. Right now, so these are like community admins. So you basically set who they are in the beginning, and then you can elect them and so forth. But there's a following slide on that. But basically, the reputation flows from these guys to the rest of the community. So if this guy over here wants to artificially boost the ranking of this piece of content, he can either not create any fake accounts, right? So just imagine it's just him. So he has a certain amount of reputation flowing to him because of these upvotes. So the edges in this graph represent upvotes. In the case of users, it's upvotes of the user's comments. So he has a certain amount of reputation flowing to him, and then he can upvote this comment and kind of direct the flow to this piece of content, and then this piece of content will have some reputation, assuming, right, he has some reputation. If he wants to create some Sybil nodes, then he basically splits this flow among all of these different Sybil nodes. So then when all of his Sybil nodes upvote this piece of content, the sum is still that original amount of reputation that's flowing to this original user. So basically, he's not changing anything by creating all these multiple accounts. And that's the intuition behind how this algorithm works and why it works. This is another visualization by Michael Zargram at Blog Science, who's doing some work modeling PageRank and various types of PageRank. So this is, on this side is a personalized PageRank, and this is a slightly different scenario. So it's a bunch of nodes, a bunch of external nodes trying to attack the system. And because we have a personalization vector among these nodes, these guys actually don't have, so their weights are very small. So kind of the size of these circles represents how much weight, how much impact they actually have, versus a non-personalized thing where you can have any, this external attacker can still gain some reputation, can still gain impact. And this is in fact how, so the original Google PageRank was not personalized, so people quickly figured out that they can just make a bunch of websites that all link to one another, and kind of as a way to boost one website's particular ranking in the search results. And this is to answer your question: how do these admins get determined? Again, so each community is fully in charge of their own reputation system. There's no kind of global governance system or anything like that. So you can start a community and you can invite people that you know that you think are trustworthy or have some expertise to be admins, right? And then you can start creating some interactions in this network, inviting the broader public to join and interact within your community. And then a really cool property of this reputation system is that you can now use, just like you rank content, you can start ranking proposals. You can start ranking governance proposals. Because one thing that we did, that each node can also have a positive ranking and a negative ranking. So you can upvote stuff and you can also downvote stuff. So you can do the same with proposals, especially, right? You can make proposals to remove admins or add new admins. So this creates this kind of nice circular reinforcing loop where if you bootstrap your initial community admins well, and they represent the qualities that you want to have in your community. Then the other members that earn reputation will also kind of represent those qualities, and then when they have an election or when there's proposals, they can basically reinforce those qualities by adjusting the admin set. So you can have a system that actually evolves and kind of reinforces itself over time instead of decaying over time or kind of becoming stagnant. So going back now to the bigger picture, the overall prediction market, steps and content, we end up with these stages, filtering stages of content, where we start with some input. So there's a stream, right, a never-ending stream of digital content coming in. And then we have as a first step, we run it through this prediction market, and we let users bet on whether this content will be relevant within specific communities, right? So again, this is a bet. This is not just like some general abstract thing, is this good or bad? This is like, okay, is this relevant to this community? Is this article about blockchain relevant to this community that's discussing blockchain information? And this doesn't have to be done by humans. This can be done by AIs, by bots, and so on, right? So this could be a recommendation, AI recommendation engines can do this, source the best articles about blockchain, recommend them to all the communities in blockchain by staking some amount of tokens on those posts. But then as a final determination, right, as the resolution of the market, this now requires reputation. So that's a smaller group of people, it's more human-centric, and this is what actually determines the rewards and the payouts. So it's kind of becomes a way for these curators to also curate the AI recommendation engines and force them to evolve, right, as tastes or as these tastes of these humans change, right? Instead of having this one AI recommendation engine that's running the Facebook feed and kind of forcing, and then that ends up determining the behavior of people. It's the other way around, where it's like where humans can actually determine the behavior of recommendation engines and have them compete against one another. And this is just kind of another way to look at that. We have this funnel happening where it's this, top of the funnel is this crowdsourced content discovery via staking. Again, could be done by bots potentially. And then we have at the bottom of the funnel, we have users with reputation, but this reputation again is decentralized and crowdsourced, right? It's not just the admins making decisions. Users that are not admins can actually have higher reputation than admins. That's totally possible. So it is kind of this continuum between people that are just like staking and playing this prediction game and people that are actually curating. So it's also kind of a continuum between extrinsic and intrinsic incentives, right? The people that are curating are fundamentally they're interested in curating well and not doing it for intrinsic incentives and putting in that work. The people that only care about earning some money, right? They're doing it for extrinsic reasons. Maybe they don't even care about the quality of the content, but they know they have to like find the the content that will please the curators so that they can make money. So it kind of aligns incentives for everyone. And of course, it's a fluid continuum between, right? So some majority of users might have some tokens, so they're doing some staking, and they also have some reputation, so they're also determining outcomes and so on. So finally, as like the last bit, I want to talk a little bit about our security model. which I'm calling dumb plasma, for lack of a better name. So it's based on the plasma design, which is, but it's like it's like a super dumbed down, much simpler version of it. So the traditional plasma, if you remember, is a construct where you have an Ethereum smart contract where you deposit some tokens, some Ethereum, for example, but then all of your value, all of those tokens are kind of transferred to this other side chain. And then you can do stuff with those tokens on the side chain that has a much bigger throughput, it's cheaper, it's faster, and so on. So the problem is, right, while that other side chain has your tokens, it can take them away and steal them from you. So the hard part of Plasma, and like the promise of Plasma, is that if they do that, if that other side chain steals your tokens, you can go back to the smart contract and say, hey, I have proof, here's the transactions, I have proof that they cheated and stole my tokens, and I want my tokens back. And the smart contract will be able to determine that you're correct and actually return your tokens. So in our case, we don't have to do any of that because the Plasma chain, our Plasma chain operator, never takes anybody's tokens, right? And this is because our prediction market is staking only. The only thing the Plasma operator does is kind of look at the amount of tokens any given user has currently, so they just look at the Ethereum smart contract, and then they ask the users, okay, so how many of those tokens do you want to lock up to get shares of this post? How many tokens do you want to stake on this post? And so on. There is still some, so the operator still has some custody of some tokens, but that risk is very minimal. So the amount of those tokens is very minimal. So at any given point, so the Ethereum smart contract is responsible for setting the inflation schedule and minting new tokens, and the operator can't change that. And it's responsible for holding all of the users' tokens, and the operator doesn't have access to that. So what the operator of the Plasma chain does have access to is at any given interval. Right now we're doing this every hour, so every hour we're minting new tokens. So at that point, the operator has, for that hour, the operator has control of those tokens because the operator has to decide who those tokens go to as curation rewards.
Who's minting the token?
The smart contract. So that's just determined algorithmically. And that could be
Based
set
on
as
what?
just a function. Say, like, you can set, like, say, a 10% inflation rate. So you can be like, okay, every hour we're going to mint the amount of tokens equivalent to a yearly 10% inflation rate. And that's it. Or you can make it algorithmic and kind of connect it to different indicators, either kind of staking activity by users, so that's what LivePeer does. You can actually connect it to a price oracle of the token, so you can mint more tokens if the price of the token is going up. You can start minting less tokens as the price is going down.
Which situation is being used in the ecosystem currently?
Right now we have an inflation schedule that's similar to Bitcoin. So right now it's actually spitting out a lot of tokens. Once it gets to 10%, it's going to be 10%. Right now this contract is still upgradable, so we're still in beta right now. It's not fixed. What we want to do is that at that point, once it gets to 10%, not leave it just fixed at 10%, but make it variable. So it's kind of like a window between, I don't know, say 3% and 20% based on either staking activity or the price of the token. But again, these are things that will, like, once they're set and committed to, the operator can't change those things. So getting back to this like risk model, the worst thing the operator can do is take these rewards from the last time period and not give them out and just take them for himself or herself. And this risk is also spread among, so the risk is time-wise, it's very limited, right? And it's also spread among many different users. So to each individual user, the risk is really small. Because once you claim your rewards, and they're in the Ethereum smart contract, the operator can't do anything. And once you notice, so this is all transparent and auditable, once you can notice that the operator is doing something shady, you basically go and elect a new operator. You don't have to do this thing like in traditional plasma where you have to try to get your money back. You already have all your money. You just cut your losses for the rewards that you didn't get in these like last period, this last reward period or several, and you just elect a new operator who commits to like doing things honestly. So that's the basic plasma, this like dumb plasma outline. So right now what we're trying to do, so yeah, again, right now our tokens in the Ethereum smart contract. The operator for us is just a centralized server right now, but what the goal to do next is to move it to a Tendermint ledger. So then it has some extra security, so you can have multiple validators kind of enforcing it. So it's not just one guy deciding he wants to take all the money. It's more decentralized. You can enforce more transparency and so on. So that's where we at right now. And that's pretty much it. That's my talk. And you guys should check out relevant.community and get some relevant coins. Upload some posts.
Well, first, thank you, Slava. That was great. I am actually interested in hearing about usage thus far. So you said you're live in beta. I'm interested in hearing kind of what kinds of communities are starting to form, which are most popular, and where do you see relevant kind of forming a foothold in terms of early usage and interest?
Yeah, so that's the big thing where like that's all we basically think about right now since we launched. We started a few initial, so right now we're creating these communities manually. We haven't opened it up to like let other people create communities yet. We will very soon. The main and biggest community right now is kind of comes from partly our social circle. So it's actually less crypto people. It's art and technology culture people that are aware of crypto. They know, like, they kind of understand it, they know what it is, but they're not like building crypto apps. So they're very like excited about this idea or these ideological concepts and the new opportunities that it offers, but they're not necessarily like deeply involved in the space. They're more interested in either general tech or general just like philosophy, culture kind of area. And the content in that community is it's kind of similar, right? So it's a lot of critique of technology and kind of like people questioning the various technological phenomena and discussing those things. We started another community that's purely crypto, so that's more of like crypto specific. That one is a little bit less active, but there are definitely some great content on there as well. And we started a third community that's more focused on culture. So like, again, kind of like our initial circle of people in New York that we have access to, or a lot of them are like culture, like fashion, art people that are not maybe necessarily interested in the tech. So we're like making something like that. We're also kind of exploring one thing we really want to do is a meme community, and that might not even have reputation, so that might just be like an engagement hack. But yeah, but that's the kind of stuff that's happening now. Yeah, Alex?
I have a technical question. Maybe I'm just stupid.
You're not stupid, Al.
Thank you. Given that you have a curation system, reputation-based curation system, why do you need a prediction market?
Thank you.
So we don't, right? So these are modular things that can be fully decoupled from one another. But
Can you explain that? That makes like no sense.
the fact that they're decoupled,
Well, the fact that you're throwing them together, like they're kind of two separate mechanisms, which is what he's sort of getting
right?
at.
So you need
Let's
okay.
not
So
interpret
let's,
what I'm getting at.
let me phrase it another way. So you need reputation to make the prediction market work.
Right, but
Right.
the reputation starts with known entities.
Yeah, but in a very subjective way within each different community. So if you want to have the prediction market, you need this reputation system.
So why do I need the prediction market?
You
I
don't.
understand why you need the
You
reputation
don't.
system to evaluate the
Right.
quality and relevance.
But
right?
the reality of this thing is that if you want to monetize, if you want to actually have any sort of, if you want to try to have any sort of business model that will sustain this and that will work at scale, you're going to want a prediction market, because the other option is advertising, and that's just going to fuck it up. Because
Why not
that's
use-
going to
why
skew
not
the
use
incentives.
cash or Bitcoin or something.
Yeah, but where is that going to come from? Who's going to pay for that? So
And
okay, so there's another side of
You
this.
can't get the token anywhere, so it's
So there's another side of this, right? So we actually created this also kind of centered around communities, where communities can also have their own ways of monetizing their own content, right? So if a specific community decides, okay, we actually want to, this like, whatever this reputation system materialize, whatever that hierarchy is, we can monetize it, whether it's through advertising, whether it's through membership fees, subscription fees, and so on. They can do that, right? The global prediction market allows us to do this at scale and kind of allows an opportunity for third-party businesses to then build business models on top of this whole thing.
why not use Augur?
It's a
Oh,
whole
come on.
different. It's a whole different design. It's the
Yeah, it's a
won't work.
functional design.
I don't know what you mean by functional, but it's a
actually
totally
civil resistant.
yeah, but it's a different use case, right? I mean, you could try to do that. Augur has its own problems of just like the resolution mechanism and oracles and so on, which is at the end of the day not dissimilar from just like relying on a reputation system for a resolution.
Let's keep it just one question at a time.
Thanks, Devin.
Yeah.
I have
Thanks.
it's a pretty easy question. Did you make your own Plasma implementation, or are you building off of someone else's, like Fourth State or Plasma Group or something?
So we haven't gotten to that point yet.
Oh,
So we
okay.
actually haven't started working on the actual like right now the implementation is like our server talking to a smart contract. So it's like a very, very primitive.
Okay.
And again, we don't need like most of what all of those implementations are concerned with is this hard stuff that we're not concerned with. What the challenge will be for us connecting it to Tendermint is it's almost like rewriting some of the Cosmos stuff of electing validators, because that would have to be done in a smart contract, because the smart contract would have to know who the validators are. Because the validators will have to like sign some messages to allow certain transactions in the smart contract.
Yeah.
So it would be like creating these like delegation mechanics, but in a smart contract versus just doing it purely in Cosmos world. Yep.
Yeah, so you were explaining that all the reputation flows down from these trusted admins. Doesn't that incentive for the admins to be creating Sybil nodes because they kind of control that sum total of all the reputation that eventually gets disseminated. And then, you know, obviously the results of all that claim to this prediction market. So there's like a huge incentive for them to become corrupt. Like, how are you managing that?
So there's two parts, two answers to that. So the incentive kind of depends. So I would not advise this model for managing like some big amounts of funds, right? I think that's when it starts kind of breaking down. So if this community, so if it's like if a community is sort of like a DAO and they have to decide what to do with $10 million, right? I would say that creates a really huge incentive for the admins to collude and like fuck shit up. Outside of that, the admins do get some rewards from just like the system working as it is. So they kind of have an incentive to keep it going. And the rewards are like, again, at any given moment, right, they can, it comes back to this, it actually comes back to the security model. At any given moment, they can collude and get all the rewards, right? And then the rest of the users don't get the rewards for that last hour, 2 hours, whatever that is. But the system is built on, so this, like the reputation system, the assumption also is like it's fully transparent. So it's very easy to observe those things. And our approach to this also is building tools for communities to be able to monitor activity and to be able to like see what's going on and then take action again from this like bottom up versus what Facebook and Twitter and all these corporations are trying to do, like trying to run these algorithms to detect some bots or some like whatever and try to block accounts. So it comes down to that, right? If the admins are doing something shady and are starting to create Sybil nodes, it will be very easy for users to notice that. And then they can take action by either removing the admins that are creating the attack, or just fork the community altogether and just, you know, just start over, create, because it's also really easy. Reputation makes it really easy to fork these things. Because all you have to do is like swap some admins and you have a brand new community with all the same information, with all the same data, with all the same users, and so on. Kind of the graph stays, the rest of the graph can stay preserved. So basically there are ways for communities to mitigate these kind of attacks by observing what's going on.
Let's just do one more question. So.
With transparency as a foundation, do you envision that like sort of opening the door for maybe a deterministic calculation of reputation that could happen using a crypto economic game like TrueBit, or maybe Merkleize some of the calculations and then have users submit it rather than these sort of validators?
Yeah, totally. So that could be another approach to that. So it could even be, in theory, it could be a combination of those, but yeah, that's a whole other kind of area. So in theory, you could construct this whole thing without the validators and just like a TrueBit type verification and just like offloading that computation to TrueBit. So that's totally, haven't explored that too much, or just like what the recent state of TrueBit is, but that's definitely another option.
Great. Let's all give another hand for Slava.
Yeah.
If there are any more questions, we can stay here kind of until these guys close down, so feel free to go grab a drink. Let's also give a round for Pete's Candy Store for hosting tonight and for many other events in the past and future. Again, if you want to definitely follow Slava and the relevant team to keep up to date on what they're up to, follow CoinFund to stay up to date on future Rabbithole Talks. Come up to me if you want to be added to our email list as well. And yeah, thanks for coming out, and see you guys at the bar.